Hello, everybody. It's nice to meet you. Nice to see all you people joining the broadcast right now. Hope you can hear me. Gonna check the sound. And the sound is okay. All right, people joining. Today we're gonna be chatting with Andreas Xertus, and I hope he's gonna join us pretty much soon. Let's see. Yeah, he's got some videos on his channel. Let me show you some of his work. So this is like his channel. He's like making some videos, and he was making them since like let's see, 4 weeks ago. Yeah, the first one 4 weeks ago. The one before is 5 years ago.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. I'm just talking about you right now. Say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody. I'm just gonna put in an earpiece so that I don't echo everybody. Hello, world. That's one of my favorite streams. How's it been?
Yeah.
Philip?
Okay.
After a few false starts, I'm so terrible at time zones. Apparently, it's like they just canceled daylight savings in California, so we're like an hour different. But it's good to be on. Good to see you.
you should have Googled the time. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
So where are you from?
I'm from California, actually, but my family's Croatian originally. But I live in Santa Cruz, which is like the furthest west point of California. Can't tell if this is backwards on your screen, but it's like it's that point of California that bends. Yeah. That's where I'm from.
In Russia, we know geography.
Yeah.
It's a deep secret for you.
Yeah,
we know geography.
There's actually probably a bunch more Russians than you realize here. In San Bruno, like after the Soviet Union, we said, okay, well, we can't let the terrorists pay the Soviet scientists, so they moved like hundreds of them or thousands of them, or maybe tens of thousands of scientists from Oblis to San Bruno, which is north of San Francisco. So there's a lot, actually. It's a weird spot, but maybe some of the audience don't know where it is.
So have you seen personally some evidence in San Francisco or maybe some other cities nearby?
Oh, of Tartarians or of Russians? Of what?
Of flooded buildings or maybe something like this.
Yeah, obviously there's been earthquakes so much, like even where I'm from, Santa Cruz is like the San Andreas fault line. So a lot of things have been knocked down, but there is so much stuff. There's train tunnels that right after World War II, they just started bombing out sections because they said, before in World War II, because they were worried the Japanese might show up or something. So they wanted to block off entrance points. But at one point, right before World War II, California was just covered in huge mansions, towers, and trains that went all the way, from the, top of California, which was about, Santa Cruz, and then down to Mexico. And you could get from Los Angeles to Santa Cruz in a day, and they had the trains. They had beach boardwalks. They had huge buildings with pools right indoors. There's actually photos of them all over the place. So,
do you have any evidence of actually building those railways, or might they be just maybe excavated from the previous one?
That's the funny thing. you definitely can see how people could have made some railroads, but the stories, right, are that they had really, really drunk Irishmen, or like then they had people who couldn't speak any English who were Chinese. And like this is like the literal, like they teach this in like second and third grade, like in school, in elementary school, that Sutter liked the Chinese because they collaborated their money. So he let them have Chinatown, and a lot of California have huge Chinese settlements. So the Chinese were supposed to be the ones who were building a lot of these rails, but clearly they weren't the only ones. There was also the Irish, right? Or at least uncovering them or releasing them to the public. But the story of Sherman's tanks across the South and Vanderbilt, right? So after the South lost its railroads, because there were railroads across the South at the same time as Peter's railroads across Siberia into Alaska, which connected Canada. So there were railroads that connected Russia to Canada to the United States, right before the 20th century. But they were destroyed. A lot of things were destroyed, and we've got these earthquakes and things. If you've ever seen after an earthquake, which we have lots of, it just looks all bent up. The railroads get like turned and like they look like noodles that have been melted. But you can't prove anything like about who built the rails.
I mean, did you see any pictures? This is just a simple question.
Oh,
Maybe.
well, yeah. There's photos of people assembling rails, but the thing is that doesn't prove. I mean, there's photos of people that are melting iron. Like you can have people that are assembling, but after a major earthquake or after some sort of an uncovery, like you're gonna have to reassemble to realign tracks.
I mean, we saw some pictures of excavation. We see completely mud and rails under the mud. They're excavating the mud, but that could be like a flash flood or something like this, right?
Well,
we'll never know.
Their excuse. That's what they're saying. I mean, that's the thing. There's a lot more evidence of that than anything else. You see evidence of people excavating. You see people assembling.
Yeah. What about San Francisco ships and all this stuff that are buried, and all the cities are built on ships? All the downtown.
The concrete ships, yeah, they have the concrete ships, and Paradise Island is pretty crazy because it's like the Star Fort and Treasure Island, Paradise and Treasure Island.
No, I mean the ships in the sea. They were buried in the sea, close to the bay, and they like right now on those ships we can find houses, and they're just standing there and nothing else.
Huh?
Have you seen this?
You have to send me that. I don't know which one that is.
Just Google about the ships in San Francisco, and you'll find this crazy story about this.
San Francisco ships and houses.
Yeah. Sunken ships or whatever, buried ships in San Francisco. We in Russia we know about it like for 2 years, or maybe something like this. Somebody posted it like 2 years ago. So it's a crazy story. Just like raising of Chicago, raising of other cities, just another crazy story about some big American city. In fact, San Francisco was actually under control of Tartary before the Civil War, and you perhaps know it as a Russian control. But in fact, those people had nothing to do with Russia, because Russia was another country, as you can see on the map. Tartary and Russia are separate countries for quite a big period of time, until the 19th century. So perhaps Russia was conquering Tartary like a Western puppet, warmongering Western puppet that was conquering the Tartary after the bombardment or something like this, a huge catastrophic event, whatever you call it. So
that seems like the likeliest case, and like there's a lot of that's what it looks like with all the earthquakes and all the destruction of California. Is a lot of buried buildings. A lot of the stuff I've been looking at was the Mission period, which is the same as the Livonian War, right? Because during the Tartar,
what year?
Like 1600s.
Oh, I don't go that deep. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. Oh,
well, yeah, that's basically because as someone who used to work in the media, I look for lies. That's been my favorite thing to look through is like, what are they lying about? So
I think they just press all this time in like 50 years or maybe 100 years, and they extended it for like 400 years, because the
Yeah,
technologies are expanding very fast, as you know.
I think that's exactly true. Actually, it was earlier. There's this series from Russia I saw that was about Catherine the Great, and
Mhm.
it talked about Yelagin. And so, he was a
I
Rosicrucian
I see
Freemason.
myself. I see myself in your screen. You sharing me?
Oh, you can't. You Oh no, really? Let
Yeah.
me see if I can make that right. My entire screen.
Yeah. You left.
There we go. Is that better?
No, again.
How about now? How about now?
Okay.
Okay, cool. So you've seen Yelagin, right? He was a historian who worked for Catherine the Great, and then he got in trouble, and he has his own island, which is this island that's got this, Yelagin Palace, and he went there to do his occult stuff, and it's right in St. Petersburg, and it's got all the dome. It has, and you'll notice right away the tower, electric tower. So it's not like, yeah, and this is in the middle of his island. So um it was designed supposedly, but like literally it's supposed to be built in 1 year in 1821, but who's to say that's the real year? And then it's designed by this guy who's a German Alpine region Italian, and he was supposed, but there's all these pictures of what he really was a guy who drew things. And he was really good at
Mm.
drawing pictures, so he gets credit for a lot of buildings, and he's from that region of northern Italy. So
Mm-hmm.
he's called the Italian, but he's clearly part of that Tartarian thing, and it connects him to Pavel, right, the Catherine's son,
Yeah.
who he reestablished the Knights of the Hospital, the Hospitalier, which is basically the Knights of Malta before it went French or Napoleon. And so they had set up this whole conspiracy where they were taking the royal family's kids away from the mothers as babies and making them crazy. And then they would have the Freemasons, educate the kids, and then eventually like they rewrote history, like you said. But it's like we starting to see like some of the stuff from the sigils. Like there was a place apparently before it was called Estonia, and before the Russian capture of Finland, that it was called Terra Mariana. And so you can already see in that Terra, like Tartara, and then Mar, which they're saying is Mary, but I think has a lot more to do with the Mar, which is the sea region and the access. And it was a confederacy called Livonia, but Terra Mariana from 12th or 11th century until the 16th century when the Russians took it, or whatever we're calling whomever the Russians are now, right? Because there's a lot of people that were supposedly from Germany, but they're really from Livonia, and they're the people from St. Petersburg, and you see the Order of the Black Eagle, the Prussian symbols.
Yeah.
So
Don't you think the Prussia and Russia looks the same? I think
well,
it's just the same country,
today,
and it was the same on all the maps, and you can see the Russia, just Russia here, Russia, and here is Prussia. So Prussia is Russia.
so did you see, what do you think of Taurus Bulba? I guess is my question to respond to your question. Like, is that answer that? Is Taurus Bulba like
Taras Bulba.
did the Cossacks get in? Are we saying that the Cossacks are really barbarians, or are we saying the Cossacks had Kiev stolen from them? Because like that kind of, I think that answers a lot about the time period of the war between the Khan and the Caliphate, right? Because you've got Muslims and you've got hordes, and they're thinking the best thing they can do is put Mongolians um, between them and the other people, because they think like if they have the Chinese Mongolians, like non-Asiatic, non-Iranian, war will happen, and so it becomes a buffer zone. And so there's a lot of raids that are happening that are just because they don't want to fight directly, so they like let in like a conquered people to fight and destroy parts of Russia and or Prussia or whatever the empire was. But if you look at it, like it was called Terra Mariana, it was a confederacy. Livonia was a confederacy. So there were a number of kingdoms that had to interact with each other and follow certain rules for their kingdoms to get to trade. So it's probable that it was like slightly more diverse than any one person that would have tried to rule this thing would have probably upset the rest of them. So it would have had to have been, an economy where people work to get against each other in order to make sure that no one controls each other. And then somebody just destroyed it, like in giant fires during like the right time. And it sounds like that's the Julius Caesar myth, is that, he realized, hey, I've got this army, let's just take it,
So I think you just, maybe a little bit persistent on mainstream history line and all this stuff. I think you should, start to revise all this information, because, even if you have some particular examples, you cannot answer the whole picture. You have to be above all these countries, little facts, little miserable information that are flooding in our heads, just to
right.
hide one simple fact that there was one empire before what we know, right? Before the split. Split is actually a split in all these countries that you mentioned in your videos. First one is Tartary. Other one is Holy Roman Empire, which was consisting of Prussia and Russia, and Lithuania and Estonia. They're also little provinces, little regions. Sweden, and mostly they were talking the language that we know as Sanskrit, or something like maybe mix of Sanskrit, Latin, and Russian, and maybe in the southern regions of Tartaria they were speaking Arabic, because we see evidence of Arabic writings in Russian armory
Totally.
in Kremlin, right? We see this. So they were using a couple of languages, and mostly those languages are connected in one group, and this group could be simply compared to Sanskrit or Russian languages, which is like 70% equal to Sanskrit, right?
Yeah,
Equivalent.
Sanskrit tends to be the grammar, and then a lot of time people will create new words. You'll use like a word from another, like from America in Russian. So they would have picked up words
Just
from
simple
Arabic.
accent. It's just a simple accent group. So you have like Germany, right? It has like 50 lands, and each land has each accent, right? And they don't even understand each other sometimes, because they have different language accent groups. So is Russian and versus Ukrainian. So is Canadian accent versus American accent. So is Louisiana accent versus, I don't know, New York accent, right?
Right.
Just
But they're trying to harmonize them all and make them
because
disappear.
it's just because of logistics and people moving, and perhaps we see so many languages group in Europe only because of that, because of those so-called events, like disease, wars, and massacres and all this stuff that is plenty described in all this history that mainstream is presenting to us.
Yeah, that's the thing I like about it, is it's like those are the lies about something, and we know that they're lies. We go in there and we're like, okay, this is at least a parable. Kind of, it's like the same as looking at the Bible or the comic book or the history book. You're like, okay, what's this, or the lie the lady told after a crime, and you're investigating, at the house and who's did what. It's like, okay, everyone's lying about something, but there was a flood clearly, or there was. And like, you really come onto the mud flood thing. Like, that's the thing. It's not just a flood. There's tons of evidence of concurrent floods of mud that happen that are huge, and they're not like just in one part of the world, but every time there's a tsunami, we see it. So it's like, that's examples of how clearly there was not just water, there was also mud flood, in a huge way. But it's not to say that history isn't a lie. It's that parts of it, like the Julius Caesar thing or the Nikola Tesla thing, they might all be retold myths. Like, I think the Nikola Tesla myth of him giving 3 parts of his technology to 3 civilizations might be a rehashing of the Atlantis myth. And I think the Julius Caesar soldiers thing might be a rehashing of the Napoleon War or the whatever the 80-year war is, right? Because there's this period called the 80-year war also, and I think that might be where everything gets confusing, because who the hell can remember the hell was happening after you've been burning your libraries for 80 years? I mean, geez. So I mean, but there's gonna be like stories about things, and it's kind of like I was saying with the flat earth guy, with Alan, with the the walking through in the Bible, there's situations where they're like, oh, we had to kill this person, and did you really, or is it just that you did and then you made it look like you were the good guy? Like there's going to be, it's not that the story is not a lie, but it tells you something about the murderer.
Yeah, what do you do for your life? I watched your website. I think you're doing SEO or whatever you do.
Well, yeah, so I did some SEO for meta tag stuff basically originally. That was my thing when I was working for Turner, was I was trying to help them connect information in this huge network, and it was really what freaked them out was the idea that they were just 1 or 2 or 6 channels and billions of channels on the internet, and they were part of a social thing where they had to have a rapport with their audience. It just freaked them out, but I also do like engineering, and so like I was working in South America for like the last year, mostly up until a couple months ago, doing St. Go Labs. And we're doing it's Santiago, Chile, and it's nanotechnology for water filtration, basically, but also free energy, and trying to figure out how to bring a lot of the stuff that, we know existed back, basically. I've all my life thought in some way or another it existed, whether it was ancient Babylon or, Tesla had it for a minute or something, but it just, somehow clearly everyone's talking about something that someone else had. It's a legacy tradition,
Yeah, it's how do you figure to name your video like this?
Oh, well, I was thinking about Tunguska's holes, and this is in Tunguska, which is the Tesla explosion in 1812, which is the same thing, had the explosions from the comets and hitting all these places. Cairo, in the middle of the night.
It looks like totally how do you call it?
Sensationalist.
No. It's like YouTube search engine robot is confused with this title, and I think it totally got crazy and gave you some views because you haven't made. It was your first video, right? 4 weeks ago.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And
that's the thing. Because it was my first video, they didn't know how to block it yet. Think of it like that.
Look at the text. Meta. Kek. What is kek, man?
Kek is like a nerd word that means laugh. It's like ha in Korean. It's like LOL.
Girl, daily, Instagram, Twitter, Congress, man. It's totally shit. I never seen anything like this. Oh, you probably blew their minds.
And then the thing is, eventually they can learn who an account is, and they can start to they can, if they don't want information out, they'll keep it out. For instance, you'll notice my demographics are shifted above the 30-year-olds. They're not letting very many of this Generation Z people see this yet, unless it goes through Reddit and then other people post it. They're like, oh, this is cool. Then kids will find it. But, I need to also make probably shorter content that's faster for kids. It's funny how different demographics are. But, I mean, that's all I'm really trying to do. It's not that I know something about California.
Trying to cheat the system, right?
Yeah, that's my main thing, because I'm just trying to get this information out there, because the system's really good at hiding it, but they're also really bad at stopping. If if you can do that, you can associate things, right? So that's another thing I would suggest is figure out whatever people are talking about in the media that's ridiculous, and then attach that somehow. Be like, Kardashian's house is a mud flood house. I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but that would be a thing you would do if you were trying to get that attached. And you'd find an attachment to somebody. Somebody care. I don't know what people care about anymore, but you'd look it up also in Instagram and Google. What are the most common hashtags? Answer. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Look, I have like some short questions, and I want like little short answers from you. Not like digging into the topic much. Like, are you following New Earth channel?
Which one?
New Earth.
Nerve. No, I
New
don't.
New Earth.
Oh, New Earth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hold on, I have to really quickly put this out
Yeah.
here.
Okay. Okay.
1 second. Hello.
So why I'm asking about the New Earth is like, let's see. Let's try to go on her channel. New Earth. I'm like showing my screen, and can you see it?
Yeah, yeah. New
Yeah.
Earth is the
Yeah.
lady she's from
Yeah.
Romania, I
Look,
think.
look,
Is that
look,
right?
look at this. Look at this post 3 days ago. I wanted to know if you seen this post.
No, I did not see that she says that, but I don't know what she means. I mean, when she says widespread, because I kind of think that it was maybe, I think it was dispersed, but I think it was widespread. I think it was all over the world because of the oceans. Like, I think it was mostly a seafaring society working with a landfaring society, and they kind of had to have you kind of had to divide it, like, because you couldn't. Some people had to be spending time in the land, and some people had to be the navy. Use an army and a navy. But I don't know. I don't know what she means by that yet.
Where you put the Star Force then? If you think that the technologies were primitive.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I think the star forts are the examples that they weren't primitive. I'm pretty sure the star
So
forts.
how can you mix it? Like if you
Yeah.
have
Well, you have
gas
an
mining,
asteroids.
if you have gas mining, and gas mining is very technological. If you have Starfort as previous gas stations and gas mining and previous fracking stations,
Well,
whatever.
Russian salt, right? What about lithium? You ever think about salt as an energy source for crystals? Like, what if what if the salt mines were actually for batteries? And you've got all these ideas of like burning to make graphene, because it would be like pencil and thick batteries that could be erased.
Yeah, mining is very widespread in all the
Yeah.
areas, and I'm showing examples, uranium mining and all this stuff, different stuff.
Today, if you were to go parts of the Americas that have Wi-Fi, you're not gonna like think that there's a civilization there, right? Because Wi-Fi. But because very quickly a biodegradable society would disappear. You
I
wouldn't
mean,
want everything to last except for the
gas.
star port.
Gas is the starter of everything. It's like the first energy for everything. Like if you have gas, you have heat, you have energy, and you have no emission of CO. Very ecological thing, in fact, gas.
Well, there's also, like there's the water, right? So you've got these the hydroelectrics. So if you've got these dams, actually, I was going to show you this. This is something I was thinking was kind of an interesting example of modern technology based on a star fort, which is the barrier to the Rotterdam. And so, it shows like basically they figured out how to use, if there was a major amount of water coming at the time, like it would come to a certain point, and then it would just point off of the water. So then it bounces off. And so any amount of debris actually hits the point, and then, it moves it off to the side there. So it would actually push off any amount of mud as a wave backwards against it. It would make a mountain with a stream kind of moat around the star fort. So there's a pretty good logic to it, and also that it would charge. It makes so much electricity. Like these machines make most
Why
of.
would you make electricity if you have it? Why would
Well,
you do it if you have it? You already have it. Why would you make electricity? You have to heat something. Heat is the best heater is the gas. So the gas is the best way to pump the production of anything, brick production, whatever.
well, also we were talking to, and I want to have him on, and you should meet him at some
Uh,
time. He's a friend Ben. He was talking about thorium, because there's these really super safe ways of getting a cataclysmic reaction out of a sand particle that's made out of a kind of element called thorium. And it's only in certain beaches, but it's in Silicon Valley, it's in Israel, it's in a part of, I think it's in Crimea, you know, it's like certain parts of the world that have this kind of sand that can be used to power things, and they don't want you to know too much about it. Like every 5 or 10 years, a company will say, we're on the verge of making it. Then the government will buy them and they'll disappear. I think
You
Hyperion
mean
was the last one.
something like more efficient energy source or
Yeah,
whatever?
yeah, it's a nuclear technically, right? But that sounds dangerous. This is a tinier thing that automatically terminates, and so it just burns up in a symmetrical reaction. So it fizzles like one of those snake fireworks, but it can make enough electricity that you could have drones, you could have turbines that spun the other way, you could have, you know, and basically I think maybe we had a lot of the steam trains and electric systems, and maybe even Krakatoa like might have had something to do with mining of thorium, like in the, you know, for before the, because at some point there was probably like a huge energy grab and they were using a lot of this energy, but there's also the difference between transmission of energy and storage of energy. And gas, that's where liquid gas especially, or pressurized gas, is a really great storage of energy, because you can bring it, like it's basically, you know, a fluid with nano batteries in it. So it's probably like, that's another weird thing about fossil fuel and why we're so into it, because like what are we, you know, what are we doing with it? And then we're cleaning it out and we're taking the excess of the shale. There's probably some value to that we're not even anticipating, like, you know, to make diamonds or something, but which can
So
be
you
used for radios.
so actually you think okay, that's your answer. So you think that the electricity was not
I think it
uh,
was widespread, basically, but I think it's kind of like it was run by certain people, you know? Not everyone had it. Like there were temples like the pyramids and things, and like that they ran it, and then there'd be a giant tower in the center of the city which illuminated the entire city. Or there would be buildings that had them that would illuminate, that were set up. And then the energy would run to people, but I don't think that there were like iPhones, you know? I think that they invented things like the radio and the iPhone mainly because once they rediscovered how to use the technology, they didn't know what to do with it. So they tried getting it into the hands of people to study them, you know?
Have you seen any of the videos that I show about the comparison of ancient some pictures and the modern technologies, modern day equivalent technologies? And you know, in fact, we had this fairy tale in Russian, which was probably first time recorded in 19th century, maybe in beginning of 19th century, and it has a plate, which is a dish, whatever, and on this dish you have an apple which is rolling in circles, and after you wish what you want to see, it shows you what you want to see, and this is ridiculous, you know. We had
It
all those
gyrates.
technologies before. Apple, which is, you know, rolling. It's just
Scrolling, yeah.
the same plate that we have, iPhone, iPad, whatever. So it's all the same, and all this, you know, cargo code that we have today, which is called the religion or whatever, where people are dressed up like clowns and, you know, having all those ugly devices that they don't want to use in Russian churches when they, you know, like doing some holy spirits and all this stuff. This is just cargo code of what we had before. We had this system of, you know, wireless technologies that were.
So what do you think about like Atlantis? Does that fit into this then? Or like where,
Yes,
like how?
yes, it's actually fitting because all those star forts are actually the outposts of the miners, and the miners were perhaps the leading power force in Atlantis trade union. And Atlantis is just, you know, Atlantic is a huge place that we know. It consists of Northern America, Southern America, Africa, and Europe, right? Just a
Mm-hmm.
huge conglomerate which was split after the Empire of Roche breakup. So it was Tartaria, which was half of Northern America and Southern America, and Atlantic or Atlantis, which was in the European side, and the Atlantic Ocean and all the shores of Africa and the Mediterranean region and Mid East. So
What about Lemuria? Does that fit into the?
Lemuria is probably another name of Tartaria,
Interesting.
because Lemuria is closer to Vedas and Indian mythology, and India is most likely, highly likely, to be on the territory of Tartarian Empire. So perhaps all those white gods that they saw are actually the northern people that went down from the north after the catastrophe, and showed them all these technologies. Those people that were living in the star forts are not the local people. They were high in degree of intellect and technologies, and the local people probably had the history that you call the mainstream history. And after the addition of all this stuff, what they actually did is they implemented the local history into the world history, because each and every nation had its own dateline, timeline, and calendars, and all this stuff, and religions. And of course, it was not connected to the Atlantis, because Atlantis had way more higher technologies. And that's why they were just using the star forts as the fortresses after the left of Atlantis. This is the reason that it was the technology was lost, and perhaps the intelligence was lost.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least the part where the technology was probably in the hands of several fleeing groups in different ways. And so maybe someone knew how to use it, but someone else knew how to make it, and they were not connected. You know, if you didn't know how to make the cathode ray tube, or you didn't know how to write the software, it would have taken a while to connect that again. And
Yeah,
you see those records in Malta, you know, and that's that funny thing about the Freemasons in France and Russia at the 17th century, particularly. I mean, anywhere, but like the Knights of the Hospitalier are taking Malta, and Malta is all about, you know, they're the Knights of Malta still call in their Catholic prayer God Allah. So like the connection between the
yeah.
Moors,
I made a
you know.
video about the controllers, and I accused Malta Order for all the wars, and they
Yeah,
are
well,
actually the controllers of these war mongering clans, and they the theoretics and the paradigm leaders of this warmongering sacrifice society, which we know as uh, the church and religious mafia.
well,
So
you know, it's like the Fomenko thing. It's like, yeah, but like they're also in charge of the treaties. So peace, war, and peace. Being in charge of war and peace. That's a weird thing to choose responsibility over.
we didn't have peace since 19th century. Each and every day we have a war, and maybe
True.
sometimes you don't know about it, but the war is still on. You have like about 10 conflicts right now that are going on
Yeah.
in Africa. You have like a couple of conflicts in Asia, and you have a couple of conflicts in Europe. So
Are you seeing what's going on in I mean, we probably shouldn't get too into like the real news, but like you see what's going on in Bolivia with China and Russia? Like they're both putting in millions of dollars worth of military equipment and like you know, plant like jets, Putin's jets and things like that. And then they're moving in 1 million citizens from China and 1 million citizens from Russia to Bolivia. And then so Brazil's kind of freaked out about Bolivia right now, but it's kind of been in the news because there's maybe conflicts there. Maduro.
yeah, Southern America is
So
the
yeah, lots of wars.
probably the uh, next chess match for the next decade.
Well,
So
that's where I've seen the most Tartarian stuff. The most mud flood architecture I've ever seen is in South America. It's
Peru,
crazy. Peru, North Argentina, South Argentina, Paraguay. Paraguay has lots of evidence of mud flood, and Paraguay probably has some of the great. Bolivia, East Bolivia, where the rainforest is like it's dangerous because there's jaguars and things up in the mountains, but there's whole spots where they'd set up to build new temples and just abandon them essentially. And they're saying like, oh well, this must have been that they built that first, and then they decided to give up on it. It's like, no, I think they realized they had to move east because, and vice versa, because there were problems. But you know, on the East Coast, you've got the Germans came in, and the Portuguese built these crazy energy cities. Like Sao Paulo is full of, you know, it looks like Dresden or Rome. It's giant. It's giant. It's bigger than it should be. But yeah, and also the giant skulls, you know, in Peru.
Yeah.
You saw the redhead thing, right? That they
Yeah, we heard this crap, yellow press crap, you know, all this stuff.
Well, oh, so do
Like
you
like they
disagree
say,
or do you believe
like
in
they
that?
say in Men in Black. Have you watched Men in Black?
Yeah,
Like I said, oh, let's. What are the news? What are the news for today? Let's watch some
right.
yellow press. And oh shit, this man was stolen, abducted by aliens. Let's go there. It's a truth
That's me,
information.
man. I'm that guy. I'm saying read the fake news and know they're lying, but
You know,
that way.
I'm in this since like the beginning of 21st century. So even before, because where I was living, you were showing those pictures of this buried museum in Omsk city, which has like a famous green building with this buried windows and doors underneath. So I mean, another short question for you. So are you? What is your like? Where you live? Are you living on a globe or you living in I don't know where you live?
I live in a flat. I live in a flat universe. I guess. I live in a metaphysical plane. I guess is the closest thing I can say that answers everybody in all demographics. Because like there is a, you know what? If I could find it, this is something that would trip you
No,
out.
no, 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 no! Don't show
Okay.
anything
All
else
right.
because
Okay.
I had a warning
If you,
already. I had a
yeah,
warning right now that we're
yeah.
showing some content that we
Well,
can
all
show.
right. If I had somebody who was if I had somebody who was like who was really convinced that things were curved, I could show them like literally where you take a flat plane and you bounce things into each other over and over again by a power of 10 or 1,000, and what you'll get is 3 1 4 1 5 9. You get the string of pi because it's the arch. So you'll find curves, but they're really like mathematical planes of curves.
No,
So
I
people
mean in
that believe
general,
in curves,
whatever. If you have
well, people that
you
believe in
stop.
curves, they're just experiencing math physics. It's not that it's and like real physicists know this. And I'm gonna make a video very soon to explain why everybody already knows we live in a holographic flat plane. Like it's just it's what space-time foam, quantum space-time foam means. Like there's no Jesuit metaphysicist out there who isn't convinced that it's a flat universe. So so this idea that like there's really any kind of difference, I think we gotta like drop it because it's like at this point it's really just trying to explain to the flat earthers how to explain to curved dome people how to actually look at science, because real science is flat and it's also holographic because there's depth, but it's flat, you know.
Okay, good enough for today. I mean, it's not a globe, right? So
Yeah, I mean, like, but you could observe it as one if you really wanted to. Like voodoo exists, right? Like you could if you wanted to observe things that way, and that's a big part of what holograms are. But that's also very scary, and that's why people should be very careful about what they perceive and what they study, because I think that there can, I like the Martian landing right now. They're trying to they got a video game company to design a colony so you could visualize it. Well, I think it's very dangerous because it makes it more real. And I also think the same thing with any amount of realization of something. It's like just gotta be careful with it.
yeah, I've seen a guy, Jason channel. I've showed you a link today.
Yeah.
I think you are the reference of his video, so he's like referring to you, and he's like saying complete BS for me. I don't know. For the first 20 minutes, I haven't heard anything that was kind of related to Tartary or Mudflat. He was like
Well,
boiling all this
what he's
mainstream.
doing, I don't really know him. Like he took my videos and he made a
No, no, no,
long
no, no.
video.
He's like referring to you, and I mean, even if you haven't seen him, I want to ask one question. He's referring to something that you call the propeller.
Mm-hmm.
Have you called it a propeller?
Yeah, the Gamadian. Yeah, you can call it a Gamadian or a propeller. or a
I mean,
lucky.
why don't you, just, imagine it just like a spinning, time lapse picture that ancients saw, and
I mean
why
that
do you call it propeller? I mean,
well because of
symbol.
hashtags, because of syntax, because of context, because I want your videos to get seen as much as I want mine to, and I want to make sure that that happens as long as possible. And the
What,
best way to do that
what do you mean? What do you mean?
the best way to do that is to talk about it in a complete, like, okay, if you want to draw something as clearly as possible, the best way to do is turn it upside down. Try to remove all the context that really freaks people out about something, and just get down to the truth about what it is from before it was misunderstood. And that's really hard to get to that point, because people will fight you tooth and nail to avoid that about anything. It's because they're going to say, yeah, but it matters because of but really there's so many things. Like, the same is to be said. I also call the hexagram a star fort, because it's important for the other side. It needs to be that everyone looks at everything more analytically and critically, and with a little, it's especially people like, you're different because you're there, but like, there's some people that look at history like it's a complete fact, and like, so it's important to look at it like it's the National Enquirer. And this is the best way: just take everything not just with a grain of salt, but like really skeptically,
Hmm.
but be like, what are they lying about?
You, it's just a way to hack in the minds or something like this. You try to
Well,
hack their minds.
no, I mean, that's part that sounds very cool in a way, but like, it also sounds like brainwashing, and it's
No,
not
no, no.
something
It's
that I'm
not
trying to
brainwashing.
do.
Brainwashing
I'm just
is like
trying to make sure that
propaganda.
people, yeah, and the thing is, I want people, well, propaganda, even, like, I almost like that word better, because like, what I'm doing is I'm making an artistic way of demonstrating a point, but I'm also trying to make sure that I'm not trying to really argue against another point. I'm just trying to open up the perception of it, because so many people latch on to a rigid paradigm. It's like, it's like the opposite. I want people to not feel like they have to believe in only, one thing is all.
Yeah, I think we need different points of view, but
A lot of them, yeah.
we shouldn't be accused in trolling or maybe misleading. So might as well, I recommend to not be careful with those facts that you present, because sometimes they are questionable.
Oh, well, the thing is,
I'm not saying I'm perfect. I have many questions, and I always ask people.
the thing is, I guess, if you're really asking why am I talking about it as a propeller, why I use that hashtag instead
Yeah.
of, the reason is because a propeller is a physical, actual, mechanical, practical use of that thing. And there are a lot of actual practical uses, like the wind turbine, windmills and sun mills. And before, if you think about the future of solar panels, what they're going to be is little tiny spinning gamadians like that. And you can look into gamadians, gamma, Dian.
No,
That's the other.
torsion energy is a spinning energy.
So
Torsion energy.
yeah, but they use either the 3, the 6,
Somebody
or the
calls it
4.
orgon, somebody calls it atmospheric electricity or ether, somebody calls it torsion,
Well,
whatever
piezoelectric and torsion.
you call it propeller, but the ancients just called it swastika because swa is the sky and tik is the movement. It's
Right.
just a Sanskrit word and nothing else. But
And that's the thing, is it doesn't necessarily mean wind or sun. It's just being self-propelled by,
it's rotating because we have an axis of rotation
but it can be
above
rotated by
us.
the sky, or by the wind, by the breath, or by the light.
Everything is
Yeah,
rotating.
yeah.
Everything is rotating, but we cannot see it. It's a torsion energy, and it's represented in rotation above us as the sky rotation, which we can see on a time lapse if you focus on the northern, polar star, whatever you call it.
Well,
You
I
can.
mean, the propelling turbines produce much better energy ratios than just straight piezoelectric photovoltaic cells. So
Yeah.
most of the energy is going into trying to make tiny, tiny, tiny little propellers, 4 sides, that go on these sheets, and they're going to spin. So it's like, we're doing everything we can just to paint the
It's
planes again with little tiny propellers. I'm just saying it's coming back
you,
eventually, one way or another, and it's small
you
enough that you
you're promoting dangerous thing, man. You might get blocked for promoting this technology to the people because it's prohibited right now. You
yeah,
know,
but I'll try to focus on Star Forts too, because those are pretty sweet also. Like
how do you
they,
explain so many brick production of those in the 19th century?
I mean, I think that the brick production was. Have you ever seen Coral Castle? Do you know much about Coral Castle? This guy in Florida, you gotta check him out. He's
The guy who was building something by himself.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot. I think there's a lot about cutting of stones. It has to do with electromagnetic harmonics, resonance, and I think that they learned how to shatter and how to.
I
I
mean
think that.
those big blocks, the megalithic blocks, so-called megalithic blocks, right?
Oh yeah, this is the other thing. I don't think that they could probably do it all in that particular time period either. Obviously, like I think took longer to have it happen, but I think the technology came. It's not just as simple as it sounds. Also, bricks like the kind of the kind of the kind of clay and sediment with iron that they chose to use so that it had quartz in it so that it could be used to make these things because it's at least coincidentally interesting you could use these things as Tesla towers because of the way they're designed, like that's weird. Like, so I think that there's a lot of work that went into knowing the geology, like, and
And
that gets back into mining, right?
why do you
Like,
think it's prohibited? I think if they really could have used it in a wide, in a wide range of areas, in wide range of
I think it
production.
was. I think the
Why
secrets of
don't?
Nim, like they
What?
wanted to take it away from people because they thought that they resented that they weren't giants and that they weren't the thing that created it, and they felt like rats that had discovered this thing. And so there's two factions probably. One wanted to just keep using the damn stuff, and the other faction wanted to destroy it all and start a new society now that they'd learned from it. And I think that they fought tooth and nail over the last 100 years, probably, maybe 200 years.
Perhaps you kind of right about it. There's always two parties, and in the conflict of two parties, there's always a third party which you cannot
Right.
see.
That's
Right?
that's yeah. Feel really bad for the third party. Yeah, and that's something also a lot of Americans don't know. Right? It's the third world. America. It's not the third class. Right? It's the other option because you had the first world, which was America. Second world, which was a socialist Soviet America. A new version, and then you've got this Tito's third option, and that's an alternative. So the third world shouldn't sound as bad, in America. We need to change our perspective of that. But
I hope so. What are your future plans for like you're gonna stop or maybe you're gonna continue your
things are
research?
gonna get crazy. I mean, so because I've been worried about the channel bouncing, like that's been happening, I might open up new channels, but I'll be keeping the Patreon so that people can jump off of ship back to it, back and forth, connect to the Facebook group, try to like just make it so that they have a hard time disappearing information. Probably the best thing to do. Also, I've got a couple friends that do social media and like some back end programming. We're going to try to get my friend Ben to build some sort of a we were talking about file dump for the thing. I think this is a bigger thing than I realized. A lot of people care about this information. We want to get as much information off of Wikipedia's first editions and 100 and 200-year-old books, get them onto our own system, which will be easier to index. And because he's got his own wiki alternative, it's like a mapping system. And then we'll print volumes every year. And then that way people can get physical copies of stuff that's been out of print. And it'll be, this copyright laws now, so we can do that. All the stuff that we want. It'll be great.
I hope nobody is right now is not listening to you in the headphones from the bushes right
Yeah,
behind
right.
you.
It's usually how they get, I mean, I got to get the feeling that at some point or other, like, everyone knows what's going to happen, and it's going to be a sensitive issue. So the best thing that they could have probably is people try to make it not, it's like disclose it in a way that doesn't cause a war. You know what I'm saying, everybody? Yeah, that would be smart.
Have you been to
So,
Croatia?
yeah, I love Croatia. Plitvich, because the craziest war ground, right? Like the pools of Tartarian war.
Have you seen any influence of Venice genuine merchant societies in Croatia? It's like Genoa, Venice
Yeah,
merchant.
well, so that's something about someone was just talking about was Christopher Cologne, and Cologne meaning the dove, and I was like, oh, Noah had the dove. Maybe that's what they're talking about in that Tartarian metaphor of Cologne. But Genoa is like this idea that Croatia was like Dubrovnik, right, is this huge white stone city with these giant underground aqueducts and tunnels, and then there's huge aqueducts out of town above ground that are just insane. It's all this white stone, and yeah, like Croatia is also where the Bible is supposed to come from, like the collection by Pope Gregory, and it's also where the Bogomilianism religion, where they've got the twin-tipped, the worship of Bog, right? So there's a lot in Croatia that's like it, but the pools there, that's the other thing. It's like kind of like the Tunguska pools, is like the Plitvichka pools are huge pools, and they're filled with beautiful water because of the quartz and
You mean
calcium.
lakes? You mean
Yeah,
mountain lakes?
yeah, the mountain lakes. They're like
Mm.
green and turquoise. Yeah, but that's a war ground, and it's full of mines and turrets and bunkers and things like that. And they say, oh yeah, it's from World War II, but then there's also bunkers from the 1600s, and oh, the Ottomans were here, and you're like, when was there not a war here? And then Croatians laugh and say, oh, we've been fighting for 1,000 years of war. It's like, oh yeah, okay. And you're like, okay, yeah, Tartary.
Yeah, all right. I hope people subscribe to your channel. I left the link. I'll leave the link in the description and probably in the ending screen
Thank you
also.
very much.
So I
I always,
encourage
I
you
always
to make some pictures in a cities nearby and maybe make a video of observations. Actually, maybe some proofs of maybe some ships, all those underground ships that left
Yeah,
inside
I
this.
actually have one I'm about to release, but I've been editing it. But yeah, because I didn't so far I've been just doing presentations, but I went to this place that's supposed to be a 200-year-old Japanese castle in the redwood forest of California. And it
Yeah.
just looks it's not. It's a Tartarian
So
farm.
I have like a list of signs of the mudflat building. So it's like weird door made ugly from the window or on the side of the building, or even added later, like an entrance that was added after the construction. Perhaps an underground entrance, also suspicious, right? Second one is the basement that has bricked up doors and windows, and they lit in the soil or mud. In other words, almost partially buried. Two or three underground floors are also the reason to do some research. Third one is the traces of excavation. Like when you see level is like this, and then you go to the site and you see excavated windows on the side or maybe in the back of the building. So the traces of excavation or rebuilding of the buildings with old basement used for maybe shops or restaurants or cafes or whatever. And fourth sign is when the buildings are so high-tech built, and you cannot imagine how it could be, how it could fit in official history, including no pictures of constructions, no blueprints and stuff like this. So I probably encourage everybody who is trying to picture some footage from your hometown, look around for these signs before you start making fun of us from all those critics that we have today, because a bunch of the people joined the criticism of the mudflat, and people trying to pessimize the content, trying to come out with the videos that are completely not about anything concerning mudflat or Tartarian, just spreading all this crappy information leading to nothing. So people like watching those videos, getting pretty crazy about this mudflat, saying it's crap, and just leaving the place and not even watching any videos anymore. So
But
don't
what you
make.
said also about going out and looking, like, I mean, if you're in America, especially these water and power buildings, they're like, yeah, go look at them. Like, just go, like, seriously, that's what freaked me out because I'd seen them. Otherwise, I
Yeah,
wouldn't have noticed it.
technology to build them, at least how to explain all these processes that were done before the building, before the construction. And do we have any blueprints? Do we have any pictures? Because the pictures were established in photo pictures in the middle of the 19th century. So it's like amazing. Sometimes we don't have any pictures, and the
Yeah,
buildings were like building later than that, and we don't have any pictures. Like Capitolian building, we have only the picture of constructing of the dome, and not none of the pictures the construction of the house. So
yeah.
it's really crazy. Why have one picture of construction of the dome, no pictures of the house or foundations? I don't know. Maybe you can find something for me, because I haven't found it. And the traces of lines that show the owl signs, like the bird of owl of Tartarian bird in Washington D.C. that we have in front of this Capitolian building. It's
I've
really
seen some
amazing.
of them. Most of the things you'll find are of them working on it. They're like changing a face or something like that. Like that's literally the most of what you'll find.
Yeah, it would be nice for you for you guys in the West Coast to find some evidence, because we have like D Marble from the West Coast, from Seattle, and I think he went to excursion or some trip of Seattle underground, and I probably didn't.
Olympia. I want to talk to. There was somebody who was telling me about Olympia, and like things in Washington are nuts.
I
Some of the
think
stuff in
San
Oakland too.
Francisco is Oakland also
Yeah,
could have evidence, because they have hills and all this stuff. Because hills
yeah.
could be possibly the evidence of excavation.
I kind
Because
of think honestly, Oakland is the thing because I mean there was stuff in San Francisco, but the money hid a lot of the stuff. But you get down to Seventh Avenue, you will. But in Oakland, yeah, like it's basically there's a military fortress and there's a bunch of people that are poor in the like in the far west corner of it. But then you get deeper into it, it's a huge urban like 60 feet or I mean 60-story building or 30-story buildings and things like that are from the Deco era, like they're tunnels. That's the weirdest ones is when there's malls from one building to another building under a freeway. Like, what? Like, who would do that? Why? Oakland.
yeah, Oakland is a very attractive in this research. San Francisco, as San Diego, and probably maybe some parts of LA that right now inhabited by uh, large numbers of population. In fact, they want us to believe in all this San Andreas and all this stuff only because they are planning something on California. We see these fires. In fact, what is your opinion on all these fires that we had? Like,
I mean, EMFs probably.
no, I
But
mean you live there. It's just
yeah, but you know what?
your point
I
of
mean,
view.
I think okay, first off, I've heard about PG&E just going bankrupt, right? Because they can't pay out. Insurance companies also went bankrupt. There's kind of a weird amount of houses just exploding, in the middle of nowhere. Trees are still there, and then
I mean, have you seen by yourself? Maybe.
yeah, down in Malibu, my friend's property completely just it's insane because like you can see trees here, right? Imagine that, and then just leveled because a tornado of fire that's just a straight white light beam comes down and then just goes across and destroys the entire house and the land and everything else. And then it's just this granite slab because the houses are made of stone and bricks, but they're completely turned to powder. So you can figure that that's probably not just someone lighting a cigarette in the forest, but there's also the fact that the president came through California right afterwards, seemed to scare the hell out of the governor by standing near him, and then he kind of mobilized the fire departments. What do you call it? The Cal Fire. And I heard some people in Cal Fire say it felt like they were in Independence Day. It was like the president came in and they were fighting aliens, is what they felt like. Because all of a sudden, they'd never fought like the chaos like that before. Like a fire in California is very seldom ever been like that. Like we have a new name for these things with super storms or super firestorms, But
And have you
yeah,
seen any videos about the firemen that I did?
No, you did a fireman video?
Yeah, I did 3
Okay.
videos. Crow, and Ray Bradbury. 3 videos,
Oh,
3 parts.
yeah, I will
And
check that.
you watched them?
No, but I know I saw that you meant the Ray Bradbury
So,
one.
I mean, the firemen in California were actually pictured as snipers or something like this, and some shots where they like, shooting the guys who were like walking out of
Oh
these
yeah,
fires.
firemen were nuts, man. And if you ever check out the gangs in New York, firemen were gangs. Like they were gangs and they fought against each other. And there would be situations where a fire would be going and they'd go get a bucket and put it over the fire hydrant to keep people from putting out a fire because it'd be rival gangs. Firemen were, they weren't, yeah, they were kind of nuts. They probably were actually making fires.
Yeah, Richard Richard Lopez actually was a fireman.
Dude, that guy is
Yeah.
amazing. I didn't know he'd been. He just told me he'd been in September 11th. I was like, helping the people out of the building. I was like, gosh.
Yeah, I hope he can give
Well,
us some
people,
pictures from the
yeah.
archives of the
Well, I
fire
was gonna say,
department.
people who don't think that he knows something, like you shouldn't talk smack about someone who's seen it. Saying like, it's actual information.
I mean,
It's pretty hard to fight.
firemen have in my research have really bad reputation in the 19th century because they are like seen in a bunch of all this uh, fake situation where they like were separately or partially consisting of the force that was erasing the evidence of the previous civilization.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a huge thing. But these guys, I think that don't know anything because because they're just like sent in there to die, because they won't, is that a lot of these firemen are just dudes that wanted to do the right thing and they figured being a cop wasn't it,
no,
what
no,
I mean?
yeah. I mean, it's modern days firemen. They are not
Yeah,
like this. I mean, I'm
right.
talking about the
Yeah,
19th
yeah.
when the evidence was destroyed, when all
Oh yeah,
those
they were destructive. They were full on destructive.
so many cities were under fire. Just check the archives. All the big cities were fired. A bunch
New York's fire, like, yeah, if anyone wants to see just a great example, it's the gangs in New York scenes. Because, like, the fires that went on, the firemen wouldn't let them put them out. And then eventually they just opened fire with cannonballs. And this might just be, of course, the lie. But at very least, that's their excuse. And it's the only excuse they have of why there's giant explosions on top of, stone buildings that couldn't have burned is they were smashed with cannonballs from the bay. It's like, who would do that? But
Yeah, because the bombardment was probably performed. As you know, the ancients could have the air fleet.
yeah.
That's why it's probably called the air fleet because it was the airships, some
They were
maybe zeppelins. I don't know how to call them, and those air fleet would be bombing or carpet bombing the targets and the
well,
infrastructure.
I think airship might be the right term because Zeppelin refers to the guy who's a German guy, and like, who's to say he invented the damn thing? It's just an
Yeah,
airship, and
yeah,
there's
yeah.
definitely lots of them. Like we see, even when we don't have photos, we have what are those called? Vignettes or venudes or whatever, like the paintings. People with paintings of them airships all over France and in St. Petersburg and in America, and then in South America, like the Germans in South America in the 19th century had, airships, and they're all light bags that are above a craft that you can be inside of. And then the thing about that is like it'd be then therefore it could glide down. You could have a gliding if you needed to, but it would, for the most part, it'd be kept by the air. So it was actually a lot safer than anyone really realizes.
Yeah,
But
of course, the technologies were lost, and what we have just one technology in a decade maybe, which is moving things actually, but the rest of them are just the technologies that we know from 19th century. Each and every technology you name, even the rocket and missile technologies made in the beginning of 20th century. So we don't have much progress for these 200 years. And actually, what we are doing right now is like taking one step forward and two steps back. So it's like
right.
dancing in circles.
But
So
I mean, even that we admit, it's like that's the funny thing when anyone wonders or speculates that we're wrong about. It's like, well, I'm going into this already knowing that we know that according to history, we got all of these ideas from Archimedes or whatever. Like Archimedes clearly had some kind of gun-like thing, right? And
Yeah, and the
probably
source that was telling about Archimedes was written in 19th century. So
right, yeah,
nobody
and
knew
then all
about Archimedes or Plato before the 19th century. So it's like not cited or referenced probably, and all those books were edited before that we know. So
right.
like what I'm doing right now is like trying to research the keywords. Let me screen share for a second, and we try go on to finish this chat. Um, there is a program in Google Books, Ngram Viewer, so you can put the keywords and search for the books in any language, and you can see the reference in each
Whoa,
year for as the book was dated. Like it could be dated like in
they're
1753.
just
So
at
it have a
peak, yeah.
source that was named in Tartary for some reasons. If you we like erase Tartary here, and we will see that no reference before the before the beginning of 19th century of the Tartaria. So before that it was called the Tartary, and we see the reference on that. And after it was starting to call the Tartaria. So it's really interesting. And also what I've seen like about the mud floods. Let's another show the Tartaria. So you can see 18th, 19th century, and it's decreasing towards the modern days. The mud flood. Also, after the second half of 19th century. But if we check only for the mud, or maybe mudslide, we also have the raising in the 19th century, and the
I
quarries.
think also maybe looking for landslides and land floods,
Yeah,
maybe.
as you can see right now, the mudslide is more popular as the name for what we see as a mudslide. So the mudflood is not very in use, but before that it was pretty much equal. So as what I can say that the mud itself is pretty much cited more towards the 19th century, although we have some reference here in 17th century and some reference in the 17th century. We have more like in the 19th century, and the escalation of this keyword.
Are you allowed to like figure out which book is the mention when you click on that
Yeah,
like
yeah, you
point?
can you
Which
can
book is
you,
the
you can
first mention of mud in the 16th
yeah.
century?
I,
That's right.
I'm like doing this in general, so of course you can do it by yourself and check all those
Yeah,
books and check all those references. But in general, the keyword raising in 19th century, and this is what we can see. It's a coincidental evidence. It's not a direct evidence, and nobody can use
pretty
it.
good evidence though. That's exactly the right time for it. I mean,
But if the people started using it more often in the 19th century, then probably the mud was more a problem for them than
more
before.
common at least.
So at least we see many pictures that show a bunch of people in the mud, and all the Civil War they all in the mud. First World War they all in the mud. Second World War they all in the mud. We
Well,
see.
anytime that there's an earthquake, there's going to be water rising. There's going to be mud afterwards from the splash. Like, and so it's like anytime, like I was looking into Venezuela. For Venezuela in 1812 had the Caracas earthquake, was destroyed and was covered in mud. And I've got friends from Venezuela. I've been asking about their family. Look what they don't know very much, but they do know that yeah, there was an earthquake and that things were completely. They just built on top of it. Is the way they put it.
Yeah,
What do you call that?
of course, we have
What do you call that?
much of those mud volcanoes worldwide, and I've been using them as one of the possible theories, and probably the third part will be actually mentioned in the mud volcanoes. But for right now, I see only this reason. We have plenty of star forts worldwide. We have a map of those star forts. We can show those star forts they left.
Yeah.
We see them. They could be used for fracking and the mining, right? And close to those star forts, we see the towns and the cities that we know right now. because most of the star forts right now are in the cities, right? Or some maybe European cities, Russian cities, or whatever, like St.
Well,
Peter.
actually, there's a lot of star forts in, like New York City was a star
Yeah, yeah.
fort. Hades on an island has a star fort. A
So
lot of Caribbean
it's
has
the
it.
evidence of the presence of the star force,
Yeah.
and the star force could be the source or the control or boiling room of this mining infrastructure that was before that. And those controllers that got the control after the split of the empire, they could be using these flooding gates or whatever, and make the mud go under pressure from several areas, and capture the city. And after the mud slided, we can see what we see right now. So people probably were all captured in the mud and probably were reset after that, and new population was brought, and those who left probably were those masons, as we know, or maybe some secret societies, skull and bones, or
Well,
maybe
that's the
even
thing I wonder a lot about. Well, like in the time of right before Catherine the Great, when the coup happened and they killed, um, what's his name, Peter? They killed Peter the Third, and so they
yeah,
killed Peter the Third. Why?
the Russians are.
Peter the Third was he loved star forts. Okay, I don't know if you know that, but it's his thing. He called them Peter Stotts. That's
Yeah,
his thing.
do you know that
So
all of them were German
yeah,
origin?
and they're all but they're Livonian. Was what I was saying earlier about
Yeah,
Tartara Mariana thing. So and they were, when the Russians or whoever weren't Cossacks, weren't Tartarians, the Mongolian hordes. There's something there. The Peterstadt, and I wonder a little bit about that because we're told basically that the Freemasons saved Russia from this crazy
yeah,
dictator.
yeah.
Well,
We know.
how much is that real? Maybe Catherine wasn't so great. Maybe she was, but sounds like she was really at the hands of the Freemasons for a while. And so maybe maybe Peter the Third was not so crazy, and maybe the Star Forts were, the last of the Star Forts. I don't know,
Yeah.
especially because they're
What, what,
from that Russian
what
connection.
is the what is the Masonic idea?
Well, just to take over Europe
Fraternship,
with
it's brotherhood, right?
mhm,
Freedom, and what else? Uh,
egalitarianism. I don't know. Liberté, égalité, fraternité.
So whatever that means, it means only one thing, that they are like for the good things, right? We are for all the good and against all the evil stuff, right? So this is what they like, promoting us. But what we actually see is totally deceiving of the population. But of course, there are some good Masonic societies and maybe some good
Well,
orders
especially
of
when they were just book clubs. You remember at one point they were just information societies, but lodges become powerful groups of people, especially at that point, it looks like in Europe, when all the royal families weren't even allowed to touch their own babies. And so the babies were being raised by their pupils, I mean, by their teachers. And, their teachers were these lodge members. So they had an ability to influence the next generation of rulers, you know.
Yeah, we have this, Masonic signs everywhere in Russia, and probably you have them also everywhere in America. And as we can see in New York, Washington is totally Masonic signs. But some of those emblems were taken from Tartarians, and we know it's like all owl, eagle, double-headed eagle, which
Mhm.
is right now put like a symbol of everything, but it's
I
not.
mean, that's the main reason it's safe to talk about these stuff because it's public domain. If it's not really theirs secrets, like if it predates their secrets, yeah, let's talk about the double-headed eagle because Tartaria, and it's
Yeah,
everywhere.
because
And
double-headed eagle has nothing to do with Tartary. Were always fighting Tartaries. We saw the pictures when the Griffin was fighting double-headed eagle, and it was like we saw the pictures when some priest made a Griffin, separated him in two parts. First part is eagle, and second part is lion. It's like divide and conquer sign. So it's like all this separation, all this symbolism shows only one thing, that we know nothing about our history, and it's totally edited in 19th century, as
yeah,
as
19th
far we
century
can go.
definitely.
Yeah,
That
it's
sums it up. It is definitely all written in the 19th century.
all
And
the
Manly P.
key,
Hall did that.
all the key occasions, all the key accidents, slave abolishment in America and in Russia, the same period of years.
Mhm.
Like what else? The British Empire, the German Empire, the Tartarian Empire disappeared. Everything was established in 19th century, and it was like a big exchange. It's like tectonic movement of historical timelines, only because the locals were not the people that were owning the Star Force, and they were just trying to be elites in the new society, try to work with their elbows to get the rebound from what we know as Tartaria, and to get the best points from that position, and score much more than they possibly could. But they had wars, they have tensions, they have some problems. I don't think it's just monolith society which doesn't have any tensions inside. I
I mean,
think.
that's the thing that makes the most sense about The Secret, though. If it's a big secret they're keeping like that, then it makes the most sense that you have to like swear that you'll die for it before you get involved with it. And like the most people that like really know the thing have been in it for like 30, 40 years, and they've got families. And it's kind of like being involved with like Pablo Escobar or something like that. Like they got pictures of your kids. You're not, there's it's a little more complicated than just like a club. So, they can keep that kind of thing secret. But it's, having said that, they talk about it. Like in the 19th century, Tartaria comes up in Freemasonry often enough to mention like that it's written in this, that it's written at all, but like let alone 19 times in Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. And then Manly P. Hall talks about it. Like that's trippy because that, he basically, he's what you call a like Albert Pike didn't go to Harvard. He could have, but he just decided to homeschool. And a lot of these guys, that's what their difference is between being a Jesuit, was they were off on their own, and they were like getting homeschooled books. But like, Manly P. Hall was like a Mason at sight, which means that like another Mason would just know he's a Mason by looking at him, regardless of whether or not someone else had made him one in a lodge. And so that's like a whole different kind of thing, because you're not ascribed by any, you never swore in a coffin to anybody. But having said that, you're still accepting the benefits of that secret. And so you're allowed to be like, oh yeah, I've got secrets, I'm a secret keeper. But you can't like reveal the secrets or else they'll kill you.
Once you get in the secret, you can't get out of the secret.
Yeah.
At least alive.
Yeah.
This is the same as what we have in Midgard Earth. You cannot escape it alive. So the only thing is way out is from through the Baba and through the death. So the Baba is the gate, which is the wound, and that's how we materialize here. So thanks a lot for joining us today, and everybody, welcome Andreas in our community. I think 4 weeks were pretty good for him, for his research. He got good results. He totally confused the YouTube, me, and pretty much a bunch of the mud flooders that were thinking he was a shill or something like this. So
someone had to do it.
yeah, he is totally, breaking in to the conscience of those who are not aware of the mudslot, and he's getting much views. So I think everybody should be engaged and maybe subscribe to his channel if you like him, and hope he can join us one more time, sometime else when we have time for this. So
And come
thanks
on
all for
my
watching.
channel too. Yeah, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and see you later.
See you, man. Thanks a lot.
Bye.